Members of the committee, you have before you for your consideration House Bill 302. The clerk will read the title of the bill.
Mr. Chair, House Bill number 302, introduced by DeVries. Bill for enacted title and act submitted to the qualified electors of Montana, an amendment to Article 2, Section 17 of the Montana Constitution, defining person to include all members of mankind to any stage of development and providing an effective date. Mr. Chair.
What is your pleasure, Representative DeVries?
Mr. Chair, I move that when this committee does rise and report after having had under consideration House Bill 302, that it recommend the same do pass.
Representative DeVries.
Mr. Chair, my friends in the House, happy Valentine's Day. This bill once again provides the Montana legislature and the citizens of Montana the opportunity to repent. Personhood begins at conception, and we need to restore to those persons their rightful due process of law. This is a right due all men through every stage of development up until their natural death, a right granted by God. My friends in the Indian caucus, abortion is a plague on Indian culture and a genocide against your own children. One cannot value and celebrate a culture if that culture is murdering a future generation.
Minority Leader Schreiner, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, we object. Highlighting race and culture is way off topic.
Duly noted. Representative DeVries, would you like to continue?
If I may.
Move past that thought, please.
My friends in the Democrat caucus, science matters. At conception, personhood begins. In days past, we could claim ignorance because we could not see the child vividly in the womb or understand the stages of human development. That is no longer the case. #MeToo. What greater abuse and harassment of young girls is there than killing them in the security of their mother's womb? You seek to protect and defend the person and rights of females. In that we are united. But in this matter of causing harm, violence, and death to girls and women, you stand alone, guilty. Nevertheless, you persist. My body, my choice, fair enough. But what you are choosing to do is kill a body that is not your own. That child in the womb is no more the woman's body than that child nursing at the breast. Both children depend completely on others for life. Reproductive health care is neither reproductive nor health care. You call it a clump of cells, right? But there's a difference between a tumor and a person. You call it evacuating the contents of the uterus. In reality, it is cleaning up the murder scene and disposing of the body. Eagle eggs hold more value than an unwanted human fetus. Maybe if women birthed kittens and puppies along with babies, you would stand with us against abortion. You resist the empirical, undeniable, scientific truth of personhood because that is the inconvenient truth. You are on the wrong side of history. My friends in the House, 46 years of abdication and wickedness, 46 years of slaughtering our children and making excuses. It is only after delivery, when those children can look us in the eyes, when they can grasp our finger, that we stay our hand and spare their lives, unless you're in New York. We are the cowards if we falter here. We will be as guilty as New York, knowing it is murder, yet refusing to call it by name, balking at the truth because that bill will never pass. Be brave and do the right thing. This isn't tax policy or a debate over Medicaid. This is not a debate over rules or rhinos. These are children's lives. We fight harder over budget matters than we do over boys and girls with no voices, with no due process. This deals with the lives of Montana citizens more than anything else we will debate this session. With one hand, we give money, distressed over neglect and abuse of children, stumped as to why our kids want to kill themselves in record numbers.
1 minute.
Yet with the other, we offer our Medicaid dollars to end the lives of the inconvenient ones. Oh, but we hate abuse and neglect. We are hypocrites. We are the Montana legislature. If we are voted out for doing the right thing, so be it. 1,600 children killed every year in Montana, killed legally, according to the law code, we let stand session after glorious session, Mr. Chair.
Is there discussion? Representative Kerr Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As one of the young women in the Montana State Legislature, I feel compelled to stand in opposition to this bill. This constitutional amendment is personal to me. This is directly legislating my health care, my body, and my life. The Supreme Court of the United States has upheld time and time again that my health is between me and my health care provider and my husband if I choose to include him. I ask you today to vote red and affirm that you trust me to know myself and to know my body. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Funk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the body, and as one of the older women in this body, I have to stand in opposition to this. I was able to be at a time after birth control was made available to women, and we were able to make good, healthy choices. And this is going against it. I know that they have been assured that this is not going to affect birth control or fertilization efforts, but the medical community, which came in strongly against this bill, did not feel so reassured. They feel that this will directly impact and close many clinics around Montana that have helped thousands of Montana women and their families have healthy, successful pregnancies, help decide their family planning. This will impede access to birth control. And as someone who was of that generation that first had the liberties that family planning was able to provide, I urge you to vote red on this that would set us back so many generations. Thank you. Vote red.
Further discussion. Representative Garcia.
Mr. Chairman, in 1982, I was going out with a very nice-looking lady, getting along very great. I come home one day, and she says, I'm going to Planned Parenthood to end the baby's life. It affected my mind and my heart very much. This was my baby, too. It takes two to make it, and I tell you one thing. If you're going to have kids, be happy. They're sent by God as a gift. But I tell you one thing, it had a major effect on my family. And now I have 174 nieces and nephews, and I tell them, abortion is wrong. Only person who can kill another person is God.
Further discussion. Representative Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speak to the bill.
Representative Dunn.
How can we, as a legislative body and as a nation, proclaim high-minded critiques of history's atrocities when we continue to abort 320,000 babies a year in our country? Since Roe v. Wade, 60 million babies have conservatively been prematurely murdered in their mother's womb. Have you done the research on what Roe did later in her life? She admitted she lied about her rape and became a born-again Christian, denouncing the practice of abortion. How does our high-minded morality on the atrocities of the past comport with our nation's sins of the present? Please spare me the high-minded euphemisms which we use to describe the killing of a defenseless baby. Your attempts at moral arguments will lay on deaf ears if you cannot vote to protect the defenseless. I'm a sinner saved by grace. I've done a lot wrong in my life, and God knows my many faults. The blood of 60 million babies is the fault of our nation, and it's a spiritual curse we will endure until we repent. Elective abortion is wrong, and it will always be wrong. The bill doesn't affect contraception. It doesn't affect dangerous ectopic pregnancies which threaten the life of the mother. Those historically have never been considered an abortion. I'd rather be right with God than right with the world. Choose life.
Further discussion. Representative Manzella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Chamber. Sorry to get up twice today. These are two important issues to me. I think it's very important that this body recognize that Montana law already contains within it the unborn children as a person. Specifically, Montana Code annotated 41-1-103. A child conceived but not yet born is to be deemed an existing person, so far as it may be necessary for its interest in the event of its subsequent birth. That is already in our code. This recognition has been in place since statehood. And this bill takes this statutory concept, applied in certain contexts of the law, to apply it evenly in all areas of the law. So that's the law. That's our Montana state law. But there's a much higher authority than Montana state law. And there was a time in my life when that authority was not important. But as I grow older and become more spiritually mature, that authority becomes more and more important. Jeremiah 1:5 states, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you." That's the authority that we're all going to have to answer to on our dying day. I pray that we all make the right decision. I'm going to vote green, and I'm going to leave it to the voters to decide what's best for Montana.
Further discussion. Representative Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speak to the bill. I think this is a timely response. If we're talking about the Constitution and we're talking about the laws and we're talking about what this does, I feel compelled to point out that this will not have the intended effect. Aside from the many good reasons, and I stand in sisterhood with the women before me who have spoken to the interest in controlling their own health care, and we heard compelling testimony from women who, for reasons that have nothing to do with their fertility, rely upon treatments that would be eliminated under this in order to manage their own health. But if you think that this will be successful, I rise to just bring your attention to the Constitution that we live under in this state that provides us with a heightened protection of our privacy, as well as the constitutional protection that I enjoy and other women in this body enjoy to be able to access abortion services legally. So if this is successful, if this makes it to the ballot, and if it were to be successful there, it is highly unlikely that it will remain successful in our courts, meaning that we will have led our state through an exercise that will be extremely costly financially, will cost a lot of time in our courts, and will send messages to women across the state that we do not trust them to manage their own health care. For that reason, I'll be a no.
Further discussion. Representative Bob Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do rise in support of this bill, but it's not. I don't speak today to change your mind because I know that whatever comes out of my mouth will not do that. But I am going to tell you a story today, and it's my hope and prayer that there is somebody out there that sees this, some young couple like my wife and I were 30 years ago. We had been dating a very short period of time. You know, and for all of you that know me, my life is I'm a pretty much an open book. I don't mind sharing. We were a young couple, and things happened. My wife was pregnant. I grew up in the mid-'70s. Abortion was a real option. In fact, it was more common than it was for somebody to have just to have the baby. We chose. And I still remember to this day sitting down on the beach and my wife and I discussing whether we would have this child or not, and we came to the conclusion that we would. Today I have my daughter Tiffany. She is one of the most spectacular people that you will ever meet. One of the most dynamic individuals that I know. As kind of a funny note, as she says it, I fart rainbows, because she is one of the happiest people you'll ever know. But it is my prayer that somebody out there, that is an option. It is an option. But let me tell you, the day that she was born, it was one of the most spectacular, life-changing days in my life. I could not believe at the moment she was born, it changed my heart that I could ever imagine having just disposed of her as if it were nothing. And so it is my prayer today that somebody out there, some young couple, maybe sitting in this gallery or maybe watching on TV, you would see this. Know that it is the right thing to do. Keep your baby. Have one of the most spectacular people in the world. God bless you all, and just vote what you know is right.
Further discussion. Representative Marler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak to the bill.
Representative Marler.
The good representative from Thompson Falls inspired me to say a couple things, too. I know I won't be able to say anything to change minds of people who disagree with me. This is a really divisive issue. I want to say some things that I would say and have said to people in my life. Probably not in this building, but maybe people in this building and across Montana are listening. To women of the world, if you've used most contraceptions other than barrier, if you've used Plan B emergency contraception, if you've had in vitro fertilization and struggled with how it went along the way, if you've had an abortion, I don't think you're wicked. I don't think you murdered your baby. I trust you with your body. I know that you have your own relationship with God. You have your own relationship with your doctor. You have your own relationship with yourself. I want you to know that. I support your decisions.
Further discussion. Representative Usher.
Mr. Chair, speak to the bill.
Representative Usher.
Mr. Chair, members of the body, I know a lady who was raped. She chose life. Her son is one of my closest friends today, and he asked me to stand up and say that to you all. He's proud that his mom chose life. But I'll quote in the committee the representative from Planned Parenthood. She said, the Montana people don't want this. I say, let the voter, or vote green and let the voters decide that.
Further discussion. Representative Windy Boy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak on the bill. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I wasn't going to stand on this bill or any other bill today, but since culture and Native Americans was mentioned, I felt compelled I got to say something. So if you'll bear with me. At the beginning of the session, most of you know what this is. It's a braid of sweetgrass. It has roots, deeply rooted as we are in life. It has an ending. This sweetgrass road of life is held very dear within my people, my family, my culture, my traditions. And it's really hard to come to this body, the particular issues that was discussed today. Just a little bit ago, we're talking about a bill that has consent to physician aid in dying. Consent in aid of dying. For me, they can look at this in black and white. That's murder. That's taking one's life. And then here we are, we want to put on another provision of the Constitution that basically states to define a person. I usually vote in favor of these because in my first session, I got here in 2002. I got home and my elders called me up and said, hey, we want to talk to you. Boy, I was all gung-ho. I said, man, these guys give me some kudos, give me some stroking of my ego. Well, I went over there, and I said, we want to ask you a question about this. What is pro-choice? I told him, well, the way I understand is that this pro-choice is giving the opportunity for a person to have a choice if they want to have an abortion or not. So he asked me, another one asked me, he said, okay, he said, if that's the case, do you practice your culture? I said, yeah, I try to attend as much ceremony as I can when possible. Do you have a pipe? I said, yeah, I carry one. And he asked me, he said, do you pray? I said, yeah, I pray. Well, what do you ask for? I went down a list. I said, well, I pray for good health. I pray for good blessings. I pray for prosperity. I pray for life. And that was all they needed to say to make me make my determination that I'm a pro-life Democrat. And I only share this with you because that is something that is beyond me. We, in this body, are all brothers and sisters, no matter what color our skin is, because the Almighty up there has given us this life, a life that has a beginning, a day that has an ending. Someday we're all going to be we'll all be going home. And it's based upon what we do, how we live our life here is going to make the determination if we go across into that life after.
1 minute.
Crossing over to that Milky Way to the north, to where the northern lights are. And these are the things that we need to decide, that there's a lot of decisions that we need to make personally on what defines that. What tells us from way back at the beginning, that first beginning of the creation of human, what was it that the Almighty wanted us to do to make that determination? Because these determinations were set, these unwritten laws that were written long before we were born here, everybody in this place here. There's an unwritten law up there in heaven, a natural law that dictates what goes on in the nature. So I'm not going to tell you which way to vote, but just keep in mind that every time we have decisions like this, it's a tough decision, because on one hand we say one thing, on the other hand we say another. So I just wanted to give my 2 cents worth, since culture and Native American was brought to the floor. Thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Sheldon Galloway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say a few simple sentences. I'd like to quote Dr. Seuss, "A person's a person, no matter how small." And I will add, and no matter how unseen. If we can kill a little small one, we can also kill a larger one. And we're seeing that across the United States today, in some states that have made some decisions. And I would be appalled if Montana went to that extent. Where do we start? Where do we finish? Let's start with defending the little ones. Thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Dudick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't tell you how much I didn't want to stand up on this bill. And I respect everyone. I respect all of our opinions. We all have our personal stories. But there's a hypocrisy that is pervading this discussion that people don't seem to understand. We have heard how we value life, and yet we've had votes against suicide prevention. We've heard how we value life and we want to stop children from being abused, and yet we don't fund enough child protection workers to stop the abuse in our state because we're trying to save money. People can roll their eyes, they can get frustrated at this, but let's be honest. If we're to run government and run it well for people, then let's look at all aspects of it, not cherry pick when it suits us to argue about something. We also shouldn't pass moral judgments on people when they've done things in their lives that you don't understand, because it's not your place. This is not a good bill. It violates our constitutions too, by the way. It's a bad bill.
Further discussion, Representative Skis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. There's a lot of discussion about what this bill will do and what it will not do. What this bill will not do is make an ectopic pregnancy an abortion. That was not an abortion before Roe v. Wade. It will continue to not be an abortion. The child is in the fallopian tube, and the mother and the child most likely cannot survive. That is the life of the mother. What this bill will not do is allow for contraception to become abortion. Contraception stops conception. That's not what this bill will do. That's not what this bill will do. What this bill will do is assert that life is sacred. It will change how we do in vitro fertilization. Rather than running 6, 7, 8 eggs, we will run 1. This bill will allow us to no longer use abortion as an afterthought or a contraceptive device once we discover we're pregnant. What this bill will do is arrive at a new Supreme Court and a new decision. I want to talk a little bit about history because we hear all the time about settled law. Dred Scott used to be settled law. And if you remember Dred Scott, it was a young man and his wife that fought for years on the simple assertion that they were people. And our Supreme Court in the 1840s said, no, you're not. You'll never vote. You'll never own property. You'll never have standing in court. You are not human. And when that decision came out, America went, what? That's crazy. It led to the Civil War, and it led to the abolitionists in our party to say, no, in fact, those people are persons, and they are free, and they can own property, and they can practice life, liberty, property. We've seen a change in America. We saw a state decide that you can actually birth a child and then kill it. That's the Dred Scott moment to this argument. That is the change that we have been screaming for since Dred Scott was first discovered. Remember, Dred Scott was not passed by Congress. It was 9 folks on a bench determining the outcome of America. And since Dred Scott, how many legislatures have attempted to overturn it in their states? Many is the answer. We are trying to address this problem. I would suggest, folks, that let Montana be the vanguard of this fight. Let us stand for life being sacred. Let's send this to a new Supreme Court, and let's win the fact that life is sacred. Life has to be sacred. Our kids play video games and they kill each other. Reset. Play video games, kill each other. Reset. Life is not sacred. This is a baby. Folks, please, I know it's a passionate issue. And God bless you folks for having yours, and I'll die in a battlefield to defend it. But it's passionate for us too. Please do the right thing. Life is sacred. Let's let Montana lead that charge. Thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, as a teacher, I've been dealing with this issue for a very long time. Where is that bright line where life begins? Is it conception? Is it implantation in the uterine wall, the second division of the zygote, neural activity, heartbeat? Or some cultures think that it's 1 year after birth. There's compelling reasons to argue that any one of these points is the beginning of personhood. So I've thought about this, I've read about it, argued this for a long time, and I've come to a conclusion. I don't know. You don't know. What we are talking about are beliefs. Representatives, you have very strong beliefs, and I respect that. And you have every right to convince us to conform to your belief system. That's fine. But you are not permitted to coerce me or anyone else to conform to your belief system. And that's what this legislation seeks to do. Our Constitution is a set of rules that allows us to construct our society. And it's not okay to use majority rule to change our Constitution to impose a belief system on us. Again, you're free to convince. You're free to hold your beliefs, but not coerce. Convince, do not coerce. There's a very bright line between those two things.
Further discussion. Representative Ferris-Olsen.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and to my good representative from Kalispell, Montana can certainly try and lead this charge, but since you brought up the Constitution, I thought it was worth talking about a couple of the cases that have come up in the last couple of years. The U.S. Supreme Court. Since Roe v. Wade, the abortion rights have been upheld 3 times, including last week when Louisiana tried to challenge some abortion rights. So we can lead the charge, but we will lose, as all of the states that have tried this before us have. This is lost in the Montana Supreme Court. So leading the charge will do absolutely nothing. And so that's one of the many, many reasons I'm opposing this amendment, and I hope you all do too.
There being no further discussion, before the sponsor closes, I would like to remind the body that no matter how contentious legislation may be, we do not imply personalities or question motives of any other member of this body. Would the sponsor like to close?
I can't do much better than Representative Skis and Representative Windy Boy did. So,
the question now arises on the motion of Representative DeVries that when this committee does rise and report after having had under consideration House Bill 302, it recommend the same do pass. Those in favor of the motion vote aye. Those opposed vote no. Are there absentee votes?
Mr. Chair, Representatives Rickey and Gunderson have voted aye. Representative Keene has voted no.
Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? If not, the clerk will record the vote.
Mr. Chair, 56 representatives have voted aye. 44 have voted no.
House Bill 302 has passed second reading.